Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Leigh Shulman, author of the book The Writer's Roadmap. Leigh is a writer and writing mentor with 2 decades of experience under her belt. In my book review, I stated The Writer's Roadmap is an amazing writer's craft book. Unlike several that I've read, this one has little to do with writing tips and tricks, and everything to do with treating your writing like a business. I was worried that the book wasn't going to agree with my creative mind, but I soon learned how wrong I was. This roadmap helped me determine what I wanted from my writing, the objective, and then helped me create a clear plan for getting what I want: goals, strategies, and measures. Having this roadmap allows busy authors to determine what things to say yes to and which things to let go, because let's face it, we can't do it all. I highly recommend this book to authors, especially those who feel they have too much on their plate and don't know which way to turn. Today, I'm chatting with Leigh Shulman, author of The Writer's Roadmap. Welcome, Leigh.
Welcome. Thank you, Terry, and thanks for having me here.
I'm just super excited to talk with you today. Can you give everyone just a really quick elevator pitch about what The Writer's Roadmap is?
Sure. Well, okay, so a 1 or 2 sentence overview of what the Writer's Roadmap does. It helps you create a plan for your writing life. And that plan includes the work you want to do. And it's also about finding a balance with all the other things in your life, having fun, relaxing, taking care of yourself and family.
I know a lot of authors will say things like, well, why do I need a plan? Right? I'm an artist. I write, I create, and I don't do business. So what do you say to that author?
Well, first of all, I guess what I would say is if you don't want to do a plan, you don't have to.
Well, exactly.
You don't have to. You do what works for you. The benefits of the plan that I would say, and the reason that I started creating these plans and sharing them with authors is, on the one hand, as authors these days, we are a business. And in order to put ourselves out there, even if we don't have to put ourselves out there like IBM, where it's very different, but just to have who we are, a branding and a way of presenting things so that we know what we want and we know what we do. And that helps our audience find us and relate to us. The other reason to have a plan, and I suspect most writers will relate to this, is it helps you figure out what you want to do. Because, I say this a lot, when people will ask me like, oh, are you done? Are you done your work? No, I'm never going to be done. There's always another idea. There's always another book. There's always another article that I can write. There's always another project or a partnership. And the plan helps decide, all right, this is what I want. This is what my top priorities are. And then these are the top 3 projects. And these are the ones that I'm going to put on the back burner. And it helps just ease that process, because I know I've been there where I'm like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm running around in circles and nothing is actually getting done and nothing is finished and I'm frustrated, yet I feel like I'm working all the time. And having a plan helps get stuff done.
Yeah. So when I was reading it, I talked with you earlier, and so that my first thought was a little bit like, oh no, because there's this acronym OGSM, and immediately I thought, oh, this isn't going to be for me. This is going to be like way more than I want. But you break it down so beautifully to help people understand like this whole process. And as I was going along through the book, and I did all of the activities and I followed through, it really clarified for me what I want as a writer. And once and when you know what you want as a writer, then you know the things that you should do, or at least it gives you a better inkling of the kinds of things you should be doing, and more importantly, the kinds of things you can say no to. Right?
Exactly.
So if someone comes to you with this great project idea and you think to yourself, well, that sounds really cool, you can check it against, well, what do I want to be as an author? And then well, yes, that's good. This is a good fit for me, or that's kind of not really along my lines. And it gives you, I don't know, it comfort in saying no to something. It's very difficult to say no to something.
Absolutely. And I think setting boundaries, and there's lots of different boundaries that you can set as an author. One of them being, hey, it's my writing time. Please just let me write.
Leave me alone, right?
Please. But like, that's a big one. But I think also, I mean, that's something that was actually the impetus for seeking out a structure for my writing when I first started, because there were so many things I was trying and I never said no to anything. And because I thought maybe something will lead me where I wanted to go, instead of kind of figuring out first where I wanted to go and then making the plan to get there. And when you've mentioned that to me before about like, OGSM and turning writing into a business. And I totally understand that. I very much felt that way. And the only reason I even joined a group, when I first heard about this OGSM, business plan structure, was when I joined a group for a women's business group, basically. And I only did it sort of out of desperation because I felt like I've tried everything else. Maybe this will do something for me. And what it did is it helped me focus, and it helped me kind of come up with this structure. And then when I started talking to other writers about it and helping them work with that, and I realized, wow, this really works. I will say that the writer's roadmap and the way that we talk about it as writers is a lot looser and leaves a lot more space for creativity. Well, I don't want to say that, because I think businesses also have a creativity, but it's different. I think there's a sort of chaos to writers' creativity that, a small business wouldn't necessarily have. And the OGSM leaves room for that chaos while also helping you create the structure. So let's say you have a plan. Let's say you're launching a book. You do want structure for that. You're writing a book. Well, you want a little bit of the creative chaos in there. And there's space for both.
Right. I think when I first got started, I was afraid that it was going to really cut out that creative spot for me. I know that, so I'm very much a pantser when I write. And I don't create an outline, and I've tried creating an outline. And when I do, I fail miserably because it's not the way my mind creates. And so I think I was afraid that this might like put a damper on what I do. And instead what it did, it almost just gave me like I feel like I have a title now, like this is Terry. And then it's like my little, like, here it is. And now it's like, okay. And then someone will come along and I think, yes, that fits exactly into what I want to do. Or no, that really doesn't. And I now know what I'm going after, instead of throwing everything at the wall, hoping something will stick and being exhausted in the meantime.
Absolutely. And I mean, it makes me really happy to hear that you've done so much, you've written so much, you have this podcast, you already have such a presence in your writing life that you found it helpful too. Like that, like I know for beginners, when you're just starting out, I know it's very helpful, but it's also nice. I'm always happy to hear that wherever people are in their writing lives, that they find this helpful. And I really appreciate that feedback also.
Even so, I've not been doing it as long as you think. My first book came out in 2022. And so I still very much feel like I'm wandering around in the wilderness with my eyes wide open, trying to figure out what to do next. And a lot of what I do is just everything. I have just been like burying myself in everything and seeing what feels comfortable on me, which may not have been so bad in the beginning, but eventually you kind of get tired. And, it's like, I can't keep doing everything. And so it was very nice to run into this. I want to very quickly let everyone see, I wrote my O statement, my objective. I'm going to, before I read mine, tell everyone what the objective statement is. That's kind of the big overarching thing in the book, that if you get the O right, the rest of the stuff is a little easier.
Absolutely. Well, because it's the O of the OGSM, and it means your objective. And literally, it's what is your vision for your writing life? And then, usually when I'm working with someone, and this also happens in the book, where it's like, okay, let's write down everything that you imagine, everything you want, where you want to live, who's in your life, where you are, what kind of projects. And then you distill it into one sentence. And I'm a big fan of one sentences, one sentence to describe your book, one sentence to describe your pitch, one sentence to describe your writing life, because it makes it very clear and it's easy to follow. So I'm excited to hear your one sentence.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and do mine, and I'm actually going to show it on here. Awesome. But let me read it out loud. I just about read the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. I want to live on the beach as a financially successful writer, speaker, and podcaster who invests time with friends and family while continuing to learn, grow, and teach other writers.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And what really, it paints that picture of where you want to live. One thing I'll say is, you did this really well. Sometimes there's an impetus to just kind of keep adding clauses to it, so it's not really one sentence. You did not do that. You have your clauses, but they paint this really beautiful, clear picture. I can see where you're living. I can see what you're doing. And then you also have these wonderful core values. And there's a section in the book where I talk about core values, because those are so important. And when you are choosing projects, when you're choosing what you want to do or how you want to write, financially successful, that's a core value. And as writers, I think in the same way that a lot of us kind of push off the idea of having a business plan, we also sort of push off finances. And I know I've done that. I definitely did that. And even to this day, like I have a bookkeeper and my finances are in order, and I have I have a formal business, but it's still something I always have to force myself to do. But all of those, you have such beautiful core values throughout your whole statement.
I can say that putting financially successful was difficult. There was something about that almost felt chintzy or cheap, like I shouldn't want that. Like, I don't know what it is. And I have to kind of make myself recognize that it's okay to be financially successful as an artist, as an author. This is allowed.
Yep. Not only is it okay and allowed, it's kind of necessary.
Because
like you said in the beginning, you kind of, let it all happen and let it all cover you, and you sort of tested it out. And that's great at the beginning, but then you get tired. And if you're not being paid for your work, you're going to be very, very tired.
Very quickly.
Right. Because then you're going to have to find some other way to make a living, unless you have, a fountain of money that comes from somewhere. Right. And I, like part of being a writer also, and it's also what I do in my writing community, and I work with a lot of people in this, is, when I talk about setting boundaries, it's like, well, there are financial boundaries too, like negotiating for a price on a piece that you're selling or a pitch that you put out there, or, usually by the time you're negotiating for a book, like if you're negotiating with a publisher, you usually will have somebody helping you, or could have somebody helping you, but there are constant ways that you're going to need to advocate for yourself financially. And it's very important. It's very, very important.
So once you get the objective down, that's just one of four. And the next thing we get into, I believe, are goals and strategies. What is the difference between those two?
All right. So the way I like to think about it is, okay, objective is your overall mission and vision of what you want. The goals those are your individual projects. So that can be, I'm writing a book, I'm developing a course, I'm building my platform as a writer, just as an example. And I say to begin with 3, just 3. And if you want to, I can say, okay, you can put a 4th one, which is a financial goal, which kind of naturally unfolds from your first 3
from the first
goals.
3, right?
Goals are really projects. And that's also a very shorthand way of saying 3 projects is about the most that we can really focus on and continue. And normally each of those projects has a lot of parts too. So, it feels like maybe you want to do more, but 3 projects tends to be plenty. And then the strategies are simply your to-do list. It's how you're going to get your goals done. So simply said, you're writing a book. Your strategy, your to-do list is sit down and write. And it's very, very simple. Whereas something like build your writer's platform will have more steps. So that if you're just starting your writer's platform, it's decide which social media you want to use, or are you going to use social media? Are you going to, try something a different way? Are you going to have a newsletter? And there's so many different options that you can have when you're putting together your platform, that your strategies list, so-called the to-do list, will be a little bit different. But the nice thing about it is you have a to-do list, but and day to day, you get up in the morning and you're like, oh, I just have to do these few things on my, or however many on your to-do list.
Right.
But you always know not only they're attached to a larger project, but that project is attached to your vision. So when you have those days where you're just head down getting stuff done, it's still always attached to the larger vision of what you want for your writing.
Right. And those goals, of course, they change and rotate through, because once you've finished writing your book, now maybe the next project is getting that book published, or launching that book, or whatever, wherever you are next in that phase. And once that book is done, it might be talking about marketing that book, and then you might actually not have it down as just marketing that book, but marketing your books in general. And then you have another project that you can now add in. So
exactly. And and the way the OGSM works, at the beginning when you first do your objective, it might take a little while. Like, you basically do the objective, you put in your projects, and you put in your to-do list, your strategies, and then you kind of implement them and you start to do them. And you might find at the beginning that things change a little faster and you're like, oh no, this doesn't quite work, and you're tweaking. But once you get it pretty much set, my objective, I've tweaked it over the years. I'll usually change it once a year at the end of the year to start my new year, but it doesn't change that much. The fundamental value of it doesn't really change. Projects, like you said, they do change exactly as you described it. You finish something, either you move on to another project or you move to the next step of that project. You have a book, you write it, you get it published, you market it. Or a platform. Well, you have a platform, you've been developing your platform, now you've just published your book. Well, how does that fit into your platform? So things very naturally evolve. Your strategies change more quickly because, they're your day to day.
right.
And, what's nice about it is it doesn't change as much as you think it will. When you first do it, you think, how is this going to last? But it really does last quite a long time.
It does last. And I think too that a lot of the strategies, those day-to-day things that on your to-do list, a lot of them are going to remain. So once you get like your social media going, well, there's certain things that you're going to do with your social media, if not on a daily basis, probably on a weekly basis, that will go out daily. You've got it set up so that it's just, happening. These are things that you're going to, social media, if you decide to go that way, you will always be doing something on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because if you don't, you might as well not have it. I mean, it's one of those, it requires daily feeding. And so, whether you're a daily get up every day and put out social media, or you do one big bulk once a week and it, filters out there every day, that's something that you're going to have on that strategy list forever. But something that I've noticed is once you have that habit, and there's this certain thing you do, it doesn't feel like a burden anymore. It's now just something that you do, and it opens up space now for a different project, or a different, because you've got this worked in. It's kind of like saying, oh, well, because I eat, I can't do anything else. It's like, no, I've gotten used to that. This is what we do at noon, right?
Exactly. And there are also ways to streamline it. You can automate your social media.
Exactly.
You can get an assistant who can help you with it.
Right.
So, and in a lot of ways, like when we're talking about writing as a business, I think that's part of it too. Like I have a lot of my social media automated. So,
right.
Different appearances or articles that I write or blog posts, there's a system that I have that doesn't take a lot of time every month.
Right.
So exactly, and it makes time. And the more you do, the more you move forward, the more you find ways to do things more quickly, to automate
Exactly.
things. And I took I think it was Alt MBA with Seth Godin quite a few years ago. And one of the things that he was talking about is you look at things like an assembly line. So first you set up the assembly line, and then you tweak the different things to make it more efficient, to make it work better for you, or realizing like, oh, this doesn't work for me anymore. I want something different in this place. So you can do that. So you're always kind of moving forward with things, and it doesn't take you that much more time.
Exactly. I actually took a podcasting course, and I'm using some of what I learned just throughout my whole writing career. And it's like every quarter you need to stop and you need to look at your to-do list and say, what's taking me too much time? What can I do to automate this? Is there anything that I can give to someone else? Is there anything I can just eliminate? It's just not really helping me here. And that if you do this on a quarterly basis, you will continually streamline your processes. And it was for podcasting, but I think the same would work for an author, or really for anybody who's doing anything, to stop and say, exactly what am I doing? And now look at this process, and what can I make better here? How can I make this less onerous? Because when I first started my social media, for instance, I felt like it was just constant, and now I've got it down where, it's like, it's about 30 minutes a week and I just get it done.
Yeah. And I think there is something to be said for, like, when you said when you first started your social media, it felt endless. And I think that is the nature of doing something for the first time.
Yeah.
So if somebody's starting a book, or you're starting to pitch, or you're sending queries to agents, it's so overwhelming at first because you're kind of swimming in it. And I think also if you're anybody who's listening, if you're in that moment of, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed by everything there is to do and to read, and how do I get this done? It eases up eventually. You just
It does.
take a deep breath and continue, and you will get to the part where you have the streamlined, assembly line where you're tweaking and you're checking quarterly. I mean, it's funny because you said like the concept of ODSM and having a business plan, but you're doing that anyway. Checking things quarterly is very business-like.
Right.
And that's
which,
okay.
Like I said, it kind of initially does kind of like startle me. And then I think, well, but why wouldn't I want to make things easier for myself? And if checking things on a quarterly basis to see what's working and what isn't is going to make things easier on myself, well, I'd be a fool to not do it simply because it's a business practice, right? I mean,
absolutely. And often I find the space that I create when I make things easier for myself is the space where I can write more and do my most fun creative work.
Exactly. So, I've just noticed, for instance, I have a lot of trouble being creative if my mind is too full of other stuff. So I claim, at least for me, my writer's block is never an actual block where I don't have anything creative left in me. Oh, what am I going to do? My writer's block is I have too many other things going on and I can't settle my mind enough to give me space to be creative. My mind apparently has to have a larger amount of space for some little gymnastics or whatever's going on in there, that if I'm all crammed with things, I can't do it. So for me, if I feel that way, then I know what I have to do is, what can I clear up? What can I finish? What can I put in a box and put away for now because it doesn't have to be doing things in my brain. And once I clear the space, then I can be creative. And this book provides you ways to help clear that space. To say, okay, well, what I'm going to do for my social media, I do on Tuesdays and Fridays. And today's Monday. So I don't have to think about that. And you can just, and I like that. I like that ability to give myself the space to breathe and be creative, which is impossible to do if you've got 4,032 things on your list.
the never-ending self-replicating to-do list. I mean, and that is the reality of it. And I like that concept of, like, when you said put it in a box to deal with later.
Yeah.
Because we do have to do that quite often. And, you know, I have set aside my Mondays and Fridays for writing. And normally that's all I do on those days. Now, to be clear, do I waste time? Do I deal with resistance? Do I, get distracted? Yes, I absolutely do.
Right.
But it's about building that practice of saying, this is my time. I put everything else under the box, and here I am. And there's something I also wanted to say about writer's block. For me, writer's block, like, you'll hear people say a lot, I don't believe writer's block exists. And I think the idea when people say writer's block is stopping them, and they haven't been, like, people who say I haven't been able to write for 10 years because of writer's block. And I think that's a fear a lot of us have, that might happen. In my experience, writer's block is about figuring there's something that's not working or something that's getting in the way, and the key is to finding out what it is. And so in your case, it was you're thinking about all these other things, and you have to find a way to push them aside and deal with them later in order to settle down and give yourself space. That's an incredibly important thing to know. And I think it can be a very difficult thing to do, where you have to just, like, take a deep breath, step back, and kind of like, all right, let me slow down enough so I can actually sit down and write. And sometimes writer's block is, like, one book that I had, writer's block was that I needed another character in the scene. Sometimes it can be as simple as that. And that isn't necessarily simple. Once I added the characters, suddenly everything flowed and it became simple.
I had that happen with my third book. I had something that I knew needed to happen. It was this inciting incident. It needed to happen, but I didn't want it to happen. It was just not what I wanted. And I hoped something else would come. And so I wouldn't write it. And I kept waiting for this other way, and no way happened. And after 6 weeks, I thought, I'm just going to write it. I don't have to keep it. Nobody's going to know about it. I'll just write it. And I wrote it. And when I did, the rest of the book opened up. And it was like, okay, that's all I had to do was just do what I don't know. I thought, can't there be this is such a difficult way. Couldn't there be an easier way for this to resolve? And the answer was no, it needed this. And I just had to accept it. And once I made that acceptance, then it was like, here's the rest of the book.
That's funny. I mean, it's funny because so often people will say, I don't, like, a bunch of different authors have said versions of, I'm just watching my characters do stuff and writing down what they do. Yes. And that's such a good example of it. And it's also such a good example of how when we're writing, like, that our writing kind of goes on its own and to a certain extent. Like, we're definitely doing it, but we have to follow it also. And I think I love that story.
We definitely have, two sides in our brain, and we also have the conscious and the subconscious. And, obviously my writing lives in my subconscious, and my subconscious and my conscious don't talk very much. Because things will happen and I'll think, wow, where did that come from? Like, I just wrote it. I watched it come up on the page, and I'm still amazed at what I'm seeing happening. And I tell people all the time that my characters will stand over against the wall with their arms crossed and look at me and say, you let me know when you're done fooling around over there, because we've got the story. And if you'll just let us write. And I'm like, no, we're trying to follow this plan that I have. And they're like, yeah, you let us know when you're done with that, and we'll get back to the creative process. And so, yeah. And this, so getting back to the writer's roadmap, it allows you to free up more time and space. It allows you to get back to writing, figuring out what it is you need to move forward. It gives you that time, because one of the things that authors don't have a lot of is time.
True. I mean, we're usually juggling a lot of things. We're always juggling a lot of different things. And, whether, like, there's writing and however many projects you have, but there's life too. And there's family and there's friends and there's, self-care. And like I say,
well, and even writing itself is more than writing, because once you've written the book, then you have all of the other things that go with helping that book get out into the world. And,
right.
So just the writing alone has so many hats that it's hard to hold. And then you, like you said, you have real life.
Yep.
And
Yeah. And
all the
I
other,
think one of the mistakes I've made in the past is when I'm in the middle of a book, particularly if it's a later edit, I am just in that book and I
right.
spend a lot of time and I just want to keep going back to it. My first drafts, I'm more of like, oh, do I really have to? And then I have to. But but finding that balance, I work when you work at home. I mean, I don't know if you work at
I
home
do.
also.
I work at
I
home.
have
Yeah.
to I have to make time to meet with friends. I have to leave
Yeah.
the house. I have to make sure that that I shower regularly. Like, I remember early on, I remember early on where some days I'll be like, oh my God, it's been 3 days since I've seen anybody or showered. No, this can't be, and I'm just like triaging my way through everything. And
Right.
I don't like living like that. I want to
No.
have more expansive, more space around everything. And I do think the OGSM allows for that because, it, when things, even like when there's an emergency, when things happen in life and I just came back from a 3-week trip where I was visiting family and we have some family members who are sick. And I didn't really work. I had a couple days that I worked, but I spent most of my time with family. And, that was really necessary for me. I was still able to get everything done because of how I'd laid out my OGSM.
Right.
I will say the one thing that I was not able to do while I was away was do my regular Monday, Friday writing. But being able to say, I realize this is what's going on now. And I have from this time to this time that I will take a break from my weekly writing and I will come back to it.
Yes.
Also gives me the space that I need, because when I know there's a plan, because I think it's often that feeling of, oh God, I'm never going to be able to sit. I used to be in this habit and now I'm never going to sit down again.
Right.
Just like, no, you have your date. You have
Yeah,
a date.
you're gonna go back to the normal. This was a break from the normal, which I also love that it's able to do. Yeah, so I want to tell everyone, if you are enjoying this conversation, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club, where you can continue the opportunity to learn about writing, gain a following. So head on over. The link is in the show notes. So can I ask you, if someone wanted to get up with you, Leigh, and talk with you more about this book, your work with other writers, what they might be able to learn from you, how do they get up with you?
All right. So the two best places to find me, and I are my website, and that's leighshulman.com and / if you go to leighshulman.com/podcast, that I have a special sign up for people who are listening to this podcast where we can set a time to talk about your writing, your needs.
Fantastic.
And we can see what you want and what you want to do. And there's a number of ways that I work with writers. I have my book. I also work one-on-one, and I have a writing community where we focus on all the different things I'm talking about. So really the first step is coming up with your plan, and then the day-to-day work in the group, from workshops to live events to co-working sessions and group coaching sessions and more. You can take part in that. So if you go to leighshulman.com /podcast, or you can go to my Instagram, which is the Leigh Shulman, because for whatever reason, someone else took my name.
Yeah.
And I love interacting there. So if you say hi, or if you follow me, I'll follow you back, and we can continue a conversation there.
Fantastic. Too. And I'll have those in the show notes for anyone who's interested. So, just take a look there. Well, Leigh, I want to thank you, first of all, for the book. It really changed the way I'm thinking about my writing, and it came at the perfect time for me. And I want to thank you for being here on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.